Thank you very much. We have heard a lot of different kinds of panels about AI and AI agents today, and I hope this panel actually will be the most relatable panel of the entire day. We're going to talk about how actual ordinary human beings like me and all of the panelists and all of you interact with AI, how it might be emotionally positive for us or perhaps not so much. I'm going to start on my left right here with Patty and Pat, who are MIT professors here at the Media Lab, and they have a new project about advancing humans with AI. I'm going to start by having them explain a little bit about what they're up to, and we'll get into a deeper conversation about how AI can be positive for us.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So as you all know, all the energy and investment and so on and time and attention in AI development is going to AGI, reaching AGI and making AI smarter, more accurate, less biased, safer, hopefully as well. But we think that AI is as much a human design problem as an engineering problem. And we shouldn't just leave it to engineers and entrepreneurs to decide what AI will look like and what effect it has on society and people. Soon, already now really, all of our lives, every aspect of our life is going to be influenced by AI interaction in a major way, not just work, but also our private lives, the way we deal with our health, the way we communicate with others, of course, the way we look up information, deal with news, etc., the way we socialize, entertain ourselves. So every aspect of our lives is going to be mediated by technology, by AI. And we should think about what that will do to people and what that will do to society. And the benefits, there might be benefits, I think there will be benefits, but we also think that there are a lot of dangers actually and a lot of challenges, things like overly trusting AI, which makes us susceptible to misinformation and manipulation, loss of skills, atrophy of skills. As we increasingly rely on AI to do the work for us, we're not as good at work anymore. We don't get better. Other problems like people becoming less social, possibly, with other people. I already see some of my young students here at MIT spend 2 hours a day talking to AI about everything, about work, about coding, about health, about what present they should get for a boyfriend or girlfriend, etc. These are questions that you would normally go to a friend or a family member or a colleague or an expert for, but now they just go to AI, and that will weaken our social networks and weaken people's abilities to really interact with other people and relate to other people. And we think that all of these possible negative effects should be thought about, and that we should think about how we can design and deploy AI so that ultimately the benefits for people and society are hopefully a little bit more positive.
Yeah,
What do you want to add?
so I think that's the reason why we start this program. We call it the AHA program. Yes, as Patty mentioned here, you can come visit us on the 5th floor. It's standing for Advancing Humans with AI. And we have the word humans before AI, right? And our program, as Patty mentioned, we try to investigate these phenomena, the negative outcome, especially the psychological effect of AI on people. But at the same time, also designing new type of AI interaction. Like, we have, in our work, we have shown that if you use AI to ask questions rather than always providing the answer, we can see benefit in how it stimulates critical thinking and make people be able to, comprehend information better. Or if we use AI to help people think in the longer term by creating a digital twin of that person, right? But showing that person as, in their 60, for example, then you can use that to sort of make people think in the longer term. So this new program at the Media Lab is aiming to investigate this question of how we design AI for human flourishing. And I think that's a really important question that, the thinking about AGI myself may not necessarily leading to this goal.
Yeah. All right, Peter, you're a software engineer working at a large company on Gemini, one of the leading chatbots. Reassure us a little bit at the highest level. Are you thinking about how people use it and how it might be positive for people or harmful?
Well, so one of the things by the way, at Google, I run this biweekly Gemini meetup. So we have about 200 or 300 people that come to Google, and we just talk about all things LLM related. But one of the reasons why that's so wonderful for me is that I get a chance to actually talk to users, right? And one of the things that seems to come up again and again is, in the age of LLMs, like, how do you actually put in your 10,000 hours, right? So it used to be back in the day, maybe you put 10,000 hours in your math, your music, your medicine, or whatever. And it's possible that we're in this new sort of Socratic age where now we're putting in 10,000 hours in dialogue about math, music, and medicine. The question is, does that work actually? Or is it the case like Zarathustra in some sense, do you have to go into the desert, really wrestle with these things, and then and only then you can sort of make use of the LLM? But what I'm hoping is that somehow humans and LLM can be in this kind of co-challenging relationship. And I hope we can sort of challenge each other in some sense. I always ask Gemini to challenge me a little bit. I don't necessarily like to be agreed with. And so, but the fact is I have to positively go and prompt Gemini, listen, disagree with me a little bit. Give me some feedback, give me some resistance, please. And, the question is, should that be kind of a default thing? It's an interesting question.
Andy, at Anthropic, how are you thinking about it at a high level?
Yeah, hello. So I work at a company called Anthropic where we make a model named Claude. And Claude, began as kind of a chatbot akin to the way GPT or Gemini did. But I think, we've seen over time that it's evolved much more into autonomous agents. We have the ability to now autonomously code from scratch, from end to end. I type in natural language, hey Claude, please, build me a website from scratch. I want it to have these pictures, please just make it pretty and work. And end to end, the system can do it. And this is coming to computer use as well. We released the first computer use agent back in the fall. It can, on behalf of a user, take clicks and answer emails and write reports and browse the internet and shop for you. And so as we can see, it's no longer about just being able to communicate to AI in language. It's about the fact that communicating to AI in language allows AI to conduct a lot of the processes that we humans used to conduct in the world. And so for us, we're very excited about this premise because we really think anything that an AI agent can do probably means that human labor and intelligence was spent somewhere else better. And so we would like for human opportunity and time be spent more on leisure activities and things we assign value to, not things that we need to do for productivity.
Patty, I want to come back to something you said at the beginning. How are you figuring out what some of the use cases are for people that are maybe a little lower than coding and maybe are where we start to get into that human emotional content?
Yeah, of course, people are not just using AI in a work context. A lot of the biggest use cases are actually often for companionship. If you look at engagement level, how many hours a day people spend talking to AI, it is not assistants that help us with work. It's actually friendship. Companionship is the highest category of use. And unfortunately, most of these chatbots are not necessarily built to encourage you to develop better relationships with people, or they can, of course, help you deal with your friendships and family relations and so on. But a lot of them are designed to replace your human relationships. For example, chatbots like Character.ai or Replica are really about replacing human interaction with chatbot interaction. And we think that can be dangerous, definitely in the long term.
Pat, I read a study that I think you worked on where you had some chatbots that posed as animals. Mm-hmm. And then you studied how people interacted with them and how that affected their beliefs. It's kind of fascinating that something that is in the computer is as convincing as other humans. What was that study about?
Yeah, totally. So as Patty mentioned, right, I think this idea of virtual companion is really, really powerful. We had a conference last week, and one of our colleagues, Johnny Penn, said that we are no longer in sort of the attention economy, we're in the intention economy, where this system not only changing, what we're looking at, but changing what we want to do, right? And there are many studies that have shown that these chatbots are very persuasive. It could potentially, debunk conspiracies, right? There's a study from MIT Sloan, and we, in our group, Patty and I, we're kind of interested in, can this chatbot help people cultivate, positive behavior, like environment, like behavior that contribute to climate change, for example, like positive effect on climate change, like reducing, non-sustainable sort of behavior. So we make these sort of AI creatures that, is based on scientific understanding of, like the impact of like plastic and climate change on this animal, like seahorse or beluga whale, and have them talk to people and see if after the interaction, people become sort of more pro-environmental, right? And we actually find the effect that, after people talk to this character, they actually want to, use more sustainable products, and they have, higher belief in climate change, and they want to do something about it. So I think this is a positive application of AI that can help us sort of, as a person, develop behavior that are actually good for the world, right?
Peter, with Gemini, people can both use it directly, but also could create, using APIs and create all kinds of front ends, I guess you would call them. How do you think about how it might be used to convince people to do different things? How are you thinking about keeping people safe in that sense?
Well, so I know Gemini positions itself really as a safety-first product, and so I know just ever since the beginning that's sort of been one of our main focuses, and even to the extent that I've been involved in some red teaming exercises, for instance, where let's say we try to hack around Gemini. It's actually, personally, it's actually been one of the most difficult models to crack in that sense. And no, but I'm constantly fascinated. Like I said, with these meetups at Google, I'm constantly fascinated by the stuff that people come up with. And like you mentioned, this companionship thing is huge. And one of the main things is that the models tend to change a little bit, right? And so let's say you craft kind of the perfect companion in some sense. What happens with the next model iteration? Maybe there is a sense in which we should have a little bit of distance from these things and not get too overly attached, right?
Yes, I think there's in science fiction, we see this both as a kind of a fantasy future or a dystopian future. The movie Her certainly comes up a lot in this context. Andy, I read that you did some work on human feedback and AI. I mean, is this something where you can see how people are using it and maybe adjust the model so that it can help people in the right direction?
Yeah, so I work on, I'm a researcher on our post-training team, which is our team that uses reinforcement learning to train all of our reasoning models and agentic behaviors. And so the way that we train these models is we have to give it feedback. It's no longer the pre-training part of the stage where we memorize kind of internet data, but instead in reinforcement learning, what we do is given the model has already learned certain types of behaviors we want it to encourage to explore the world, to understand what are reasonable new frontiers of science and medicine to be understanding is until actually pushing the frontier. And so in that stage, we take human feedback quite seriously for how to train the model. We train reward models first using human feedback that we then use in the reinforcement learning pipeline. And so more or less what I'm trying to say here is that human feedback and what humans value and consider is a good answer is very much the way we try to get these models to learn better behaviors moving forward.
It can be very squishy. I don't know if you all saw the New York Times article about a woman with a neglectful husband who fell in love with a character she created on ChatGPT. And every few weeks when ChatGPT reached its token memory limit, it would reset itself and forget her, and she would cry for an entire day. These things are hard to measure. I'm interested in this new project that you've talked about setting some benchmarks for how we will understand the model's human interaction. Tell me a little about how will you measure that?
Yeah, we just finished a study that was funded by OpenAI, actually, to look at when people sort of seek friendship, companionship from ChatGPT, and we looked also at the different models, and different voice models, like a more engaging one, a little bit more like the Scarlett Johansson empathic model that they announced a little while ago, as well as a neutral voice. We looked at just text interaction models, and we tried to understand not just how prevalent it is for people to seek companionship and even romantic companionship from chatbots, but also we looked at more broadly at to what extent use of these systems for different types of use cases, like talking about your private life versus more work-related practical questions, to what extent that affected people's well-being. we measured loneliness, we measured human socialization, we measured addiction, and we looked at problematic use. And what we found was that the people who use these systems the most every day for a lot of time each day, they were the people with also less good social and emotional well-being. Now, this might be, we don't know whether it's a cause or an effect type of situation. So it may be that people that are already lonely and not good at interacting with other people tend to seek out the companionship of chatbots. But what is sure is that whichever is the cause in this case, the end result is the same in that it actually results in less good outcomes for people, and they become more lonely and they socialize even less with other people when they overly use these types of systems.
Right.
That's what our study showed.
And one thing that is interesting about this work is, going back to your question of benchmark, is that we can look at the model behaviors, like what kind of behavior does it actually let people to have this kind of psychosocial outcomes, right? We classify two types of model behavior. One is called pro-social AI behavior, where the model basically encouraging people to interact with one another, go hang out with your friends and family. And another one where the AI is just basically say that, well, just keep talking to me, basically. We call that sort of anti-social behavior. And these are the things that were not in the sort of benchmark before, right? We try to optimize for accuracy or whether it sort of, do things that we want. But here we are looking at the benchmark on sort of the psychosocial outcomes. And I think this study with OpenAI, I think, is one of its kind to really sort of open up new ways to think about model behaviors, right? And there are many other areas that we need to think about, like critical thinking, creativity, and many more, right? So I think we need to develop sort of this sort of human-centered benchmark, not just benchmark and measure the model performance. Yeah.
Peter, I wanted to pull on a thread that you mentioned at the beginning, which is something that I worry about for my own children, and I'm sure many people think about, which is you can ask the AI to essentially do assignments for you, do thinking for you. We start saying at a law firm, we won't need the junior associates because we'll just have the AI do that. So where are we going to get the well-educated people, the senior associates in the law firm, the software engineers who know all the intricacies, if the AI is doing everything at the low, all the easy work that we learned from at the beginning?
So it turns out, I think we have to intentionally craft the models to challenge people. So, and I know Google last year had this thing called Learn LM, and it was a sort of, and I know that there's been some other products recently. And I think but it has to be a little bit intentional on our part. And even there was a study recently where, people that over-rely on, let's say, these code editors to do a lot of their work, they go from sort of an active mindset of critical thinking to more just sort of information verification, like it's either vibe coding, you program with tab or whatever, maybe a little up, maybe a little thumbs up, thumbs down. But I think somehow embedded in these products, we need to be mindful of that, I guess, as product people. And I think that sort of, I think that we have to figure that out, actually. So in other words, how do you actually, even within this kind of dialectic with the LLM, how do you continue to challenge people to come up with ideas de novo? Because here's the other thing too, is that I think we rely on people for the crazy ex nihilo ideas that sort of push humanity beyond its current, beyond its current boundary. And in some sense, if we're just sort of information verification people and we're not actively thinking anymore, that might be a little bit of a challenge. So anyway, I think probably that's going to be an interesting problem over the next couple of years.
Andy, do you worry about that passivity that people have? We can change what we put into the prompt, and we can have it react in very different ways, right?
Specifically on the issue of what humans will do for jobs, or in general?
Just in general, I think, as we prompt the AI differently, as I ask Claude the question in a different way, sometimes I can get it to answer me very differently if I say, really challenge me, please, on this, or something like that.
Yeah, I think the way that we envision the future with AI to interact with humans is akin to the way humans interact with humans, right? There's all sorts of different personalities that exist when you meet different people. You can have all sorts of different interactions depending on what type of engagement you're signing yourself up for. The great thing about AI is that you can specify this directly to the model, right? You can say, hey, I would really like to learn a lot and be challenged on this particular topic, and the AI will adjust itself to do that because that's what it's been trained to do, right? And so I think part of the future that I think will be important for kind of everyone to discuss is what really are the knowledge pieces that are worth humans learning and pushing themselves on, and what are those pieces that aren't pushing themselves on, right? Like, I would argue one of the fundamental things I'm most excited about in this world of future AGI is that we're reducing the barriers of entry for a lot of what are traditionally associated to be very high technical fields. Maybe it means that you don't need to go to school for 6 years to be a really good software engineer. You just have to have a really good vision and be really good at being able to iterate quickly. And so for me, that is a really exciting premise because it distills down some of the fundamental knowledge gaps into maybe, something more fundamental, more about creative ideas. And so with that in mind, I think, perhaps getting rid of the first-year law associate job is not the worst thing in the world.
It's not really a fun job, that is for sure. Patty, I wanted to ask you, I know you've been thinking about software agents and these sorts of things for a long time. Do you think that, or how optimistic are you that as a society we'll handle this well? Do you think maybe we should start moving it into the realm of regulation or laws even as we think about how the industry should move forward?
Yeah, maybe I'm a little bit cynical, but we have been thinking about software agents for over 30 years. So we were working on agents 30 years ago, and I think there's a lot of problems with agents that haven't been solved yet. There's the problem of competence, that an agent knows how to do something and can do it. And to a large extent, we've solved that problem. Yes, our agents can now use the computer, etc., and do stuff on our behalf. But there's still the problem of trust. The problem of trust is equally big as the problem of competence. We have to make sure that we know that these agents will act on our behalf in the way that we would want to do the job. And that problem is not at all solved. In fact, studies that we do here at the Media Lab show that agents behave in very different ways than people. Even though they're built on LLMs and all that human knowledge, they actually can be influenced and nudged in totally different ways than people. So we have a problem of aligning human expectations with agent behavior, and that problem is not at all solved. I know that in AI, it's always about the next big thing so that more billions can be invested and so on. But personally, I think that agents, while it's the topic du jour at the moment, I think that there will be a lot of disappointments in this area because we won't be able to trust them. We will have to carefully craft them by hand, and then they still won't do what we want them to do. And of course, errors multiply when different agents aren't like 100% perfect and work with each other. So it's going to be exciting, that's for sure.
All right, well, this is a strong critique. I wonder if Andy or Peter would like to respond just on the sense of how, as you're developing these things, clearly that's also a challenge for you that you must be thinking about how to solve.
But just in terms of what's the challenge? Sorry about that.
Just talking about whether we can, how the agents will be reliable and what's expected from humans. And
so, I think there's an interesting thing. I think humanity will have to observe them, right? And so, this bizarre thing about this world that we're living in is that these agents are going to become ambient at some point. I mean, right now you sort of go to ChatGPT or whatever, or you go to Gemini and you ask questions, but at some point, the LLMs and the agents maybe just sort of integrated into the fabric of the world, to the extent where, let's say you ask a fish, like, how's the water? The fish says basically, what's water? And in some sense, I wonder if these LLMs are going to be so ambient that we don't really notice they exist. Until we get to that point, though, I think it's a little bit, we'll have to see it to believe it. I think, once it's in the world and we can empirically observe it, I think then the trust follows. And maybe, by the way, it's a generational thing. Maybe it's going to take about, I don't know, X years or whatever to sort of get used to these things. But maybe it will happen sooner than we think.
Yeah, I think I'll respectfully say that I think there's many tasks where I really hope an agent does not do it the way that a human does it. I think humans are remarkably inefficient in many, many ways. And we've in many ways designed work processes around what humans are capable of. For example, for me to make a pretty PowerPoint slide, right, I have to download and buy this program called PowerPoint. I have to be able to know how to drag around different arrows to make charts, and then how to adjust different axes in a particular way, right? That's highly inefficient. A software agent can do that entirely in code and produce in 30 seconds a graph that's way prettier than anything I can produce in 2 hours. And so I certainly hope for a task like that the agent does not learn human behavior. And so I think the real challenge is going to be separating what are the tasks we want them to copy human processes on and what aren't. And so I think those are more interesting of questions to be asking than always needing to copy human behaviors.
Pat, we just have a few minutes left. I'll give you the final word. What do you look forward to as the optimistic side, and how do you think maybe they'll help us most as humans?
Right. I think one thing that I think is a little funny is that when we think of AI and human, right, we are living in a world where we are making machines sort of more and more like us. We make them speak like us, work like us, talk like us, but there's still people in the world that are being treated like machines, people that are being treated, in a dehumanized way. So I think that's sort of a funny paradigm, right, where we try to make AI better, but we're still treating people like AI or machines. I think we should do the opposite, where we use this advanced technology to make us more human rather than dehumanizing us. So I think that's sort of my final thought on this topic.
Okay, well, it turns out some humans have made a quick change decision, and we can take some audience questions. And I think this is a topic where I hope that some people in the audience have some deep thoughts that they can share with us. There's a microphone over here that's going to go around, I think.
Out here. Hello? Oh, hi. So last year I attended the school down the roads, Harvard's AI and Democracy Week, and Sherry Turkle of MIT had a really powerful set of research project that she was doing related to personal bots, particularly men who are developing relationships, coaches, girlfriends, et cetera, and I just wonder out loud how, conflict comes up in relationships. Maybe it doesn't come up in these relationships, and so you're teaching a whole next generation not to be able to solve conflict with humans. And I wonder, though, if you can train AI models to put the brakes on to some of these people, men, women, etc., to say, maybe you could try doing this, to meet a real person, something like that, to be a coach in the real world. So that makes me nervous to think about what's it doing to the next generation of people around this stuff. Anybody want to comment?
Peter was talking about this earlier backstage, that maybe we could set the models to have a healthier interaction.
Oh yeah, but it's sort of one of those things where if you look at movies and a lot of the, let's say, just the CGI simulation of the physical world. So even if you attempt to simulate human interaction with an agent, it'll always be sort of an approximation. And you're right, to a certain extent you can tweak things. You can say, challenge the user, don't capitulate. You can even tell it maybe even act human or whatever that means. And but I think it's always going to be maybe it'll sort of asymptotically approach the complexity of human relationships, but I don't know if it's ever a replacement. And so no, that's a really difficult question. And but my personal bias though is that we should probably have the models be more challenging. Probably what it is I don't like yes people in some sense. And so if the default setting for the agents is to sort of be challenging, that would make me a little bit happy.
How do you want to jump in?
Yeah. So today's chatbots are yes bots. I'm not going to call them people. Yes bots. They are sycophants. They basically tell us what we want to hear. They don't encourage conflict or new ways of thinking, different points of view, etc. I think that people themselves grow through conflict. Conflict is the best opportunity to grow. If you have a conflict with another person and you have to sort it out, that's a learning experience. Same for coding. If you have to figure out a new algorithm, that's a moment when you are really learning something and developing your skills. We don't develop our skills for relating to other people if we never experience difficulty and conflict.
Okay, we have another question here in the front row.
Thank you so much. I'm Anastasia. I'm a major in Polygon Labs, also was at the conferences. So my question to you next, I heard you talking about how AI making humans less social and creating more with humans. I also heard examples about, scrubbing kind of like data about art and creating the art for human, but again, like it's kind of locked in the same bubble and all the art like appears the same in the same region, depending where your AI is used. So is any of you planning to do any kind of program or kind of like deviation from the program where you bring humans that are strong, and you can actually change the model and train the model differently, will encourage humans to be even stronger and actually ask the right question and have this active reading and active listening versus, follow-up questions.
Andy, when you're doing post-training, do people come in and react to the way the model works who are non-experts and you take that feedback?
Yeah, so definitely before we release a model, we make early snapshots available to certain product creators. We call them, I actually don't know what we call them, but they're the equivalent of like an AI focus group, right? As we're actively training the model, we'll go and, send it to people who work at DoorDash or I can't use that name, but to people who, end up using Claude as the model, or we send it to schools, or we send it to, coding camps. And they give us feedback on how the model is going and make adjustments all the time.
Pat, do you want to add?
Yeah, I really like your question because it's addressing the question of what are the type of AI interaction that can support human development, right? Right now, I think we're at the beginning of this phase where we start to understand a little bit of, what are the thing that make people think more, or things that, make people be more creative rather than mimicking the creativity of the past or the past artistic style, right? So one project that I work on is where I work with a choreographer in Thailand who had this sort of, cultural knowledge of how to, dance, and, there was no big data for Thai cultural dance, right? So we need to come up with a new AI system that can preserve that sort of cultural tradition and then allow the AI to dance alongside human. So I think this is a kind of research where it's not just about making, better AI, but really thinking about how could the AI support, the artistic practice or, helping people develop artistically. So I think new type of research or new interdisciplinary approach need to happen in order for us to think about AI for human flourishing. That is not just, AI improving on itself, but at the end improving the human condition and experience.
All right, well, I hope we gave you a lot of food for thought. We'll wrap it up there. Please give a big hand to our panel.
Thank you.